Hello and welcome back to the Charity Shop Chat podcast with myself, Mimi Cartwright.
And with me, Charlotte Greenwood. And hopefully you know by now that this podcast is powered by the Charity Retail Consultancy, who provides charities with retail expertise and training to help maximise performance, strengthen teams, and ultimately get more money in your till to support your vital causes. And through the Charity Retail Learning subscription in partnership with the CRA, charities can also access nearly 50 specialist online training modules. So do make sure you check that out.
So on today's episode, it's all about leadership, specifically what charity retail needs from the very top. Charity retail is one of the most complex and visible income streams charities have. It combines people management, property, logistics, trading risks, sustainability, and community engagement. Yet it's still too often misunderstood, undervalued, or over-scrutinised in the wrong ways.
We'll be exploring how CEOs can better support their retail teams and why retail leaders are frequently overlooked for director of income generation roles, how boards and trading committees can add value without becoming too operational, and why equality, diversity and inclusion is absolutely central to the future of charity retail. And we couldn't ask for a better guest to help us unpack all of this. Today we're joined by an experienced charity CEO, a strategic leader and a passionate advocate for community impact, inclusion and purpose-led organisations.
She has led large, complex charities, understands the realities of governance and income generation. She's also a strong believer in the role of charity retail plays, not just in raising funds, but in shaping how charities show up to their communities.
She also released a book last year, a little book of leadership lessons with raw, honest and relatable insights from her own leadership experiences. And if that still wasn't enough, she also hosts the Black All Year podcast, celebrating, recognising and educating everyone about black culture all year round. I mean, I'm just tired thinking about everything this woman does. And if Molly May says we will have the same 24 hours, then this woman definitely 100% makes the most of that time.
So whether you're a CEO, trustee, retail leader, shop manager or volunteer, grab a coffee, settle in and get ready for a really, really important conversation. Please welcome CEO of St Oswald's Hospice, Steph Edusei.
Hi. I'm hoping I'm going to live up to all of that.
We haven't said anything that's not true.
Absolutely.
It's a personal pleasure to have you on this episode. You're definitely a great role model for me. When I started my career in charity retail, I think you were the very first Black female CEO of a hospice that I ever met. So I really love the fact that you use your position to raise awareness not only of charity shops, but also about EDI as well. And obviously those two things are my biggest passion. So thank you for agreeing to indulge me and coming on today.
No, thank you for asking me. It's a real pleasure.
So can you tell us a bit about your journey into charity leadership then and how you became a CEO?
Yeah, so my background is actually in the NHS. I worked in the NHS for 18 and a half years, not clinical. I always say nobody would want me to be the clinician. I don't have enough attention to detail apart from anything else. But yeah, so I worked in the NHS, started off as a clerk typist, medical secretary, and then worked my way through management and leadership. And then really, I just had enough. I had enough as a culture. I felt like I wasn't able to actually make real change. And I stepped out and I kind of had a bit of a bridging into the charity world in that I moved into being chief exec of Health Watch in Newcastle and then also Gateshead. So that was a not-for-profit. We actually set up a community interest company that ran it partway through my tenure there, but it was a statutory organisation, so it was a little bit of a comfort step. And then I was involved as being a trustee for various charities and things like that, and then saw the role that came up here at St Oswald Hospice, and it was one of those ones where I immediately went, oh, I'd love to do that. And then went, because it's St Oswald's Hospice and it's huge and it's such a major part of the culture and the heart of the Northeast and particularly this part of the Northeast. And then I had a word with myself and said, look, just apply. And there you go. I was really, really fortunate to get the job here. So I had my interview in February 2020. So you can imagine.
Not sure what happened then.
I thought, and this is really relevant actually for charity retail. I started on the 1st of May 2020 when all of our shops were closed. We had an online business, fortunately, we had eBay at the time, so that was still operating. And we actually set up a click and collect. So particularly around furniture. So what we did was because the warehouse was completely empty, the team had loads of time, they set up little room scenarios and everything was for sale. So people could contact us through social media and say, oh, I'd really like that vase or I'd like that sofa or whatever. And they could just order, pay, and then they came and collected it.
Brilliant.
So that was quite a nice little way of making sure that we still had retail going through that time.
Yeah.
But every single one of our, at the time, 24 shops were closed. And that was not something I'd anticipated as a keen charity shopper, that I'd come into nothing really. And our staff were furloughed as well. So.
Yeah. It was a tough time for everyone, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I love the innovative kind of like online IKEA.
Yeah.
That's great.
It was brilliant. Absolutely loved it.
And at a time when we're all sat there with nothing to do but scroll on our phones, what better way to...
That's it. And full credit to the team. They took that opportunity to really think about our model and how we did things and to be really creative. And we're reaping some benefits of that now. So.
Yeah.
So how has your past experience and that early experience coming in during a time of COVID, how has that shaped the way that you think about income generation and retail?
I think retail's a really interesting one. I'll come back to this in a sec, but income generation generally, it's interesting when you come from something like the NHS where yes, I've always had to manage budgets or for a large part of my career and money has always been tight. But actually at the end of March, they just wipe the slate clean and you start afresh. Coming into a world where that isn't the case was quite challenging, and actually educating the NHS that that's not the case for charities is a huge issue as well. But I think that a couple of things have helped me in that I have also run my own business. So when I stepped into Health Watch, I set up my own business. So that understanding of marketing and things like that was really, really important. For me, though, there's something about retail that is a real plus, but it's also one of the challenges in that we all shop. Absolutely everybody shops. And one of the advantages then is that people have a real connection with our shops. They see our shops. I know when I got this job, my daughter was still at school and she used to always find it difficult to explain what it was that I did. And she loved it, partly because she could say to her friends, you know, the St. Oswald shops that you see? Yeah, my mum runs them. That was my job. I ran the shops. And everybody went, oh, I understand that.
It's a real sense of pride, though. It really is.
Does it then go, I went in there and I didn't see your mum?
But actually, I'm a dance teacher, and one of the kids that I dance went into one of our shops and said, I know your boss. I know the chief exec. So yeah, it does happen. But also the drawback of that is that everybody shops and therefore everybody thinks they know how to run a shop.
Oh yeah.
So everybody's full of really helpful advice about what we should be doing and what our pricing structure should be and stuff like that. And I mean, I'm not a retail expert. I really stress that. So I will make suggestions to the team. And if they go, yeah, that's a good idea, I feel like I've won. If they say, yes, Steph, no, I just go, okay, right, back off. But people genuinely think that they understand retail because they've shopped their entire lives.
Oh, yeah.
And we all know it's far more complex than that. And actually, they're really skilled people that run charity shops in particular because it's so complex.
Yeah.
The fact that you never know what stock you're going to have for a stuff.
Yeah, you're right. So how important is it then for CEOs to visibly champion their retail teams? Because you're very active on your social media accounts, doing your charity shop outfits, which is brilliant. You know, how important is it for you to do that visibly, both internally and externally to the public as well?
I think it's particularly important for a charity like ours where we have a physical site that is close to the shops. Because a lot of the, particularly our volunteers, don't come to the hospice. A lot of our customers don't come to the hospice. And what we need to make sure is that the shops don't just become a source of income that's completely detached. We want them to have the same values and really understand what it is that they are there for, why they are raising the money. We want them to be able to have those conversations with customers and with volunteers about what it is we're doing, what the challenges are, and things like that. So actually, me showing a real interest in them brings them a bit closer and helps with that connection. I think that's really, really vital. But also, because they're not physically here, they can get forgotten about as well.
Mm.
So I think for me, being a bit of an advocate means that they're kind of present on the hospice site. And it's interesting, our clinical team, particularly some of our auxiliary nurses and things, will go, "Oh, I saw you online and I saw you got that. And well, when you finish with that, Steph, you can pass it my way." So they're really actively involved and understanding that element of St Oswald Hospice, because it is still part of the charity.
And kind of then in a similar vein, obviously you do so much. You have a great online presence, a book and a podcast as well. For a CEO or a leader that doesn't have those kind of points of access, how would you recommend staying connected with what's really happening in the shops, and still like remaining strategic as a CEO?
Well, first of all, I'd say as a leader, if you don't have a social media presence, you are letting your organization down. And I know people find it really cringy and you don't have to do what I do and speak to camera and stuff like that. But actually, nowadays in the modern world, a charity leader needs to have some kind of social media presence. And how you make that happen is up to you. But I firmly believe it is an asset. But actually, whilst I do all of that stuff, which is very showy, for me, it's that I go into the shops and I talk
Yeah.
with the staff and the volunteers, and that's more important to me. Is that when I am in there, yes, one of the drawbacks is I have to buy something in every shop that I go to, but because it costs a fortune, just because I'm there so much. But it's that connection, it's that understanding. You can ask what's going on, how are things going. That is the most important part of it. It's the hearing, the understanding, it's the going along. We have retail managers meetings. It's about going along to them occasionally to be able to hear from them. It's that is the stuff that really makes the difference. But as I say, you need to have that presence as well, so you can talk about the work of your charity and obviously charity retail.
Mm. That is really interesting, because some leaders think that you should remain a little bit more neutral on LinkedIn, or not bring it to the forefront. So it's nice to hear you say that actually you think the complete opposite is really important, to have that voice and lead by example.
Yeah, I think you've got to understand and remember that what you say publicly is going to reflect on the organization. So I'm really careful
Mm.
about how I word things on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn particularly. But yeah, I think it is really important. It's important that I share and comment on the stuff that the hospice is doing, and kind of elevate and share that more. Um, it's part of my role as a chief exec.
Yeah, and there's a positive side as well, because people will see that if they don't work for you or they don't donate to you, they'll see that it resonates with them. They're more likely to either donate to you, shop with you, or apply for jobs with you as well,
Yeah,
if they're
and we've
local.
certainly had people that I have been initially contacts with or networked with on social media, who I then have met with either through physical networking or just because we've had conversations and I've said, "Do you want to come to the hospice?" Who have then gone on to be supporters in various ways, and there's a number of them that I know that's where that's originated.
Yeah. And as a younger person, we've had these conversations a lot recently of just firstly, how influenced we are as a generation, and we're the first generation to grow up with not knowing life without having digital screens. But it just shows how powerful it can be on social media, and how integral it is, as you say, as a CEO, but also as a charity as a whole, to have that online digital strategy. So yeah, completely agree with that.
And but it's important to be authentic with it as well. I find it quite cringy sometimes when you see people doing stuff, and you just think you're hating every second of this. Yeah, So it it has to be real, and I think that is the thing that actually your generation is really good at, is about quite quickly seeing somebody who's not being authentic and going, yeah, I'm not having any of that. So yeah, you have to be authentic, and you have to show up in a way that is right for you. As I say, if you don't want to talk to camera, don't talk to camera. Do written posts, but do something.
Yeah.
Everything that you do with like your myth busting, it is just creating that transparency and that authenticity that, yeah, firstly, as a younger generation, we can observe and see quite quickly. And secondly, as charity retailers, you have to be transparent on the shop floor. Like, you have to have that connection with each customer that walks into the shop. That's half of what the whole experience of like shopping the charity shop is about. And so, yeah, having that transparency online and that then being translated, it just puts the charity sector and the charity retail sector in the light that it needs to be in.
Just one other thing actually about the way that we as chief executives show up in charity retail. I think it's important that we don't just do, I talk about wafting a lot. So it's important I just don't waft in and go, oh, you're doing so well, and then waft out again. So it's about having those proper conversations, but it's also about, so when we opened our new Gosforth shop, I spent a morning in there helping to sort and hang the goods before we opened the shop.
Oh, wow.
Because actually for me, that was, it gives me an understanding of what our
Yeah.
teams are doing, but also it means that I'm chatting to the teams as I'm doing it, but they can see that this is important to me. It's about understanding what you're doing, but people recognizing that, yes, I've got a chief exec title, but I'm actually just a person.
Yeah.
And therefore, if there is anything that they want to say, can we do this? Or we've got a problem with this, hopefully they feel more comfortable about speaking to me. And it's lovely. I've actually got some retail volunteers that are connected on Facebook that will message me. And even just with things like Happy New Year, but that means that they feel that I'm approachable in
Yeah,
that way, which is
yeah.
great.
I love that. I would love more CEOs and trustees as well to get down, literally pull their sleeves up and see what it's like to work in a charity shop. I know one time we were getting a lot of scrutiny about whether we were sorting donations in the most efficient way and things like that from the trustees. So actually my CEO went down there, put on a high-vis vest, and she sorted for the morning in the donation centre. And she came out of it and was like, I can honestly say that we are doing everything as efficiently as possible. I asked questions, I did it myself, and yes, we are doing that, and that is really
And it's a
important.
real eye opener when you see some of the things that are donated as well.
100%.
I mean, wow. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. So what difference do you think senior leadership engagement makes to the retail team morale and performance? And obviously, as a winner of Most Supportive CEO for the CRA Awards, you must have made a difference. What does that look like?
I think what was really lovely about that award actually was that the team nominated me. They wanted to nominate me. It wasn't something that we as an organisation said, oh, let's put Steph forward for this. They decided that they wanted to do that. And I think that engagement makes them feel valued, recognised, and like I say, not so distant from the organisation itself. The fact that actually somebody does care about what they're doing. More people come into contact with the hospice through the shops than they ever will through our services. So if somebody has a bad experience of our shop, then it's St. Oswald's Hospice they're having a bad experience with. And we are looking at how we can really use that kind of 25 venues we have now to further delivery of our services. So we've got some quite large shops now, and how could we be using them out of shop opening times to run things in there? How can we connect people in the community who may need support and advice and guidance with the hospice via our shops? So them understanding that they are more than just a income generation tool, I think is really important. And I hope that that's what my interest in them does. And yes, I praise them for great results and stuff like that, but actually that it's more than that. They are far more than just pounds.
And in a similar kind of vein to that then, there's a feeling, I guess, that retail can kind of sometimes feel secondary to fundraising in the context of wider income generation teams within the charities. Considering that charity retail leaders manage large teams, complex operations, why do you think it is then that often they're overlooked from a director of income?
I think there's something about, if we look at things like heads of retail, how focused are they just on retail? So from them looking at what they can do themselves. So if we think about heads of fundraising, part of what we do in fundraising is they have to really be connected into
Of
what's happening in
course.
the rest of the hospice.
Yeah.
They've got to understand what's going on, why we're raising money for this and that. So they've got that broader understanding of the whole charity. Whereas retail, I think, can get sidelined a little bit or pigeonholed into just looking at that. So I think there's something about, for heads of retail that are aspiring to those kind of positions, making sure that they get opportunities to see the rest of the organization and not just that. But, phrases that I've heard retail referred to as like the Wild West, because it can be, everything can go on in retail and does. We get the most entertaining adverse events reports from retail, because you just go, they did what? Normally customers, I hasten to add. But so I think that it sometimes has this reputation of being very, very different. But again, it goes back to that, well, we could all run a shop. And actually, if you think about the amount of people that, oh, I really like crystals, I'll open a crystal shop. Or I really like cheese, I'll open a cheese shop. And then they fail. It shows you just how many people think that is an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
So I think as well that maybe the value and the skills that takes on are very underrated by um, boards, unfortunately, sometimes. Um, so it's probably the combination of the heads of retail that are aspiring to do some stuff, but also about how do we make sure that boards understand just how complex this is. It's not as simple as, well, I'll put that out at £3.50 and it'll sell and everything will be hunky dory, because it's really not.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's really interesting what you say about how potentially heads of retail can become siloed in their own, especially if they're in a different building to the rest of the fundraising team or the rest of the charity. It can be really difficult. And I've had lots of debates about this, as you'd expect, with my peers, and going for interviews and for jobs, and I'm always so proud of any head of retail that gets a director of income
Mm.
generation job, because I'm like, yes, one of us did it. Well done. That they saw the value in what we bring to the table. So I guess my question is, do you think that fundraising and retail should be split out, or do you think it's right to sit them under one income generation team? Do you think then one always gets a disadvantage if that director doesn't have experience in both areas, or do you think it's okay? Because every charity does things differently.
I think it really depends on the director. So I'll talk here. So Anita, who is our director of income generation and marketing, she's amazing. She's absolutely fantastic. And I will do absolutely everything I can to hang on to her as a director. So she has our head of comms and marketing. She has our head of fundraising, our head of retail under there. Now, one of the things that Anita does really well is she brings those three together as a team on a very regular basis. So kind of every other week, they meet as a senior team, so they are connected and understand what's going on with each other. And I think that's really, really important, because actually they do complement each other. And fundraising, when we had the big legacy campaign, and we've just had a giving day, our shops were all set up as part of that giving day. So they were actively involved in fundraising as well as selling goods in retail. So having that connection is really, really important. But if you've got a director who cannot encompass that whole remit of income generation, you've probably got the wrong person, if I'm honest. Um, because you need to have somebody who can ideally trust their heads of, or whatever title they want to give them, can trust them and take advice from them, but can really bring them into the team, so that you've got a cohesive income generation team.
So what skills do you think retail leaders bring that boards and CEOs might sometimes underestimate then? What things that should we be shouting more about and kind of blowing our own trumpet about?
Um, First of all, creativity. Just that, and that ability to constantly look, scan, reinvent, adjust. Fantastic people management skills. I mean, like I say, some of the challenges that we encounter means that they have to be really, really I think, quite emotionally intelligent. The best are very emotionally intelligent, but there's a real commercial perspective that I think a lot of charity boards miss. So our head of retail, Andrew, can be so challenging to me and will question me, and we have really robust debates, but I love it. And I try to make a point afterwards of going, I know we disagree, but thank you for that, because it actually, it challenges me. It really makes me think, "Uh, is what I think that we're doing the right thing? Or actually, why aren't we doing that?" So I think there's that kind of business acumen, that ability to challenge, the ability to flex and adapt is really, really something that I see probably more in retail than I do anywhere else in the charity.
That's great. And it's great that you have that challenging debate because, sometimes people fall into the trap of being a yes person around a CEO. And
Oh,
actually
there's no fear of
that's
that.
and that's good. It's good that he's got the confidence and he's got the authenticity to be able to say, actually, this is my point of view. And then you're able to have a healthy debate. And it's not about one of two of you being negative. It's just having different perspectives and then agreeing sometimes to disagree.
Yeah.
How can charities better develop retail leaders into kind of future senior leaders, do you think?
There's probably something about us not thinking about them as retail leaders, actually, and just thinking about them as leaders in the same way that we might do senior nurses or, um, HR professionals, that we don't just assume that that's all that they have to give. Um, I think charities are not necessarily the best at leadership development, mainly because we don't have a lot of money spare for leadership development.
Yeah.
So it's about thinking about how can we do that without it costing a fortune, but to really make sure that conversations are being had with our retail leaders about what are their aspirations. And even if they want to be a head of retail for the rest of their lives, how can we make sure that they do that in the best way and still fulfill any ambitions that they might have in that role? I think that there's something about whoever is in charge of your retail should be seen on a par with, in a hospice situation, whoever is your matron or whatever. They're running large, complex departments that are vital to the operation of the charity, and therefore they should be treated in exactly the same way and given the same opportunities and development.
Brilliant. As someone that's just coming into the first early stages of their career, I just like to say it's so inspiring to speak to you because I've been on the journey with retail already, and yeah, this leadership kind of aura that you have is just like so lovely. Your team is obviously very lucky to have you, and I would like to take this moment by saying I did get your book in my stocking for Christmas.
Oh, love that. You know what? You're not the only one as well. I got a message from I'm not going to say who he is, but somebody else. And I felt like replying saying, "You mean you haven't already bought it?"
So moving on to kind of training boards and committees then. So they can be incredibly valuable, of course, but they can also be quite challenging. But from your perspective, what should their role really be?
It's interesting because this applies right across the board, for everything that we do. A trustee's role or a trading committee director's role is there to gain assurance. It is not there to run the organisation. And in my trustee roles and others, I've had to really rein that in. I love being a charity trustee because I don't have to do it. It's great. I can ask the questions and say, I need more assurance on that, but I don't actually have to deliver it. But actually that's what people really need to recognise. And I think there's a really fine balance, particularly within retail, I think, between giving enough detail and giving not enough. And it's something that it's a tightrope we walk all the time. Um, we give the activity and kind of finances for each of our shops, but then have to pull them back from getting dragged into so why was the Shire shop up this month and not last month? Because actually that's not really relevant. Are they delivering what you'd expect them to deliver? And can we do more? That's the kind of thing. What more might they need to be able to do more? That's the kind of question they should be asked. So I think that having a good chair, we've got a great chair. I've been blessed with really good chairs through my time here, but we've got a great chair at the moment who really understands that. And I think the relationship between a chair and a chief exec is absolutely vital. I try to be really open and honest with my chair, and that means that they might hear about stuff that others might not necessarily share with the chair, but we'll talk about issues and challenges and stuff that's going on so that he's fully aware of what might be coming. So I think that relationship is really important. So then if we did get into a situation where we've got somebody who is getting too into the detail, that I can just go give him a bit of a nudge and say, could you just pull them back a bit? So yeah, it is really important that they are there to seek that assurance. This is actually something I've learned from our chair of saying, so what question is it you're actually trying to answer in asking that? Because I could give you that information, but what is it that you're actually trying to find out? What assurance is it you're actually trying to seek? Because I could answer your question and it wouldn't give you that answer. So I think there is something there about when you're managing somebody like that, it's probably because what they're sitting there is saying, we're not making enough money. How do we make more money? Um, and it's kind of asking, almost being like a coach to them and asking those questions to get to what is the root of the issue, and then we can deal with that instead of the superfluous. Why are you selling men's t-shirts at £2.50 instead of
Yeah.
£3 or something like that?
So what advice would you give to heads of retail then when their board starts becoming too operational, and they're not getting as much support in bringing them back to a strategic guidance and reassurance then? What channels would you suggest they go down?
I think they need to go through their line of reporting. So whether that's to a director, to the chief executive, whoever they report into, I think they need to be having those very um, open conversations with them, because what they might find in doing that is that's actually because there's been some direction from the chief exec, which might then suggest that there's a lack of trust in retail. And I know that happens, unfortunately. So having that, hopefully that isn't the case. And then actually whoever is that kind of line of management can then champion their case a little bit and try and pull things back. As I say, sometimes that trying to understand what it is you
Yeah.
really want to know, I think is a really valuable way of pushing back, and without going, you're getting in my face, get out. But kind of, that when they are getting operational, saying, I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to give you the answers that you need, but I need to understand what is it you're really concerned about,
Yeah.
because I'm sure it's not what you're actually asking me, because that's quite an operational thing.
Yeah.
And trying to get to the bottom. But that's when actually going back to the question about retail management and leadership, that's when you're bringing those real leadership skills to bear instead of just getting all prickly. Because believe me, I've been there when somebody asks you a question, you're like, I really don't want you to ask me that. That's irrelevant. Instead of getting all prickly, you really kind of have to dig deep and kind of go, right, I'm going to go in as a leader and a coach here and have that kind of approach to it instead of getting defensive.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I do think sometimes there's an element of trustees wanting to be helpful, especially if you're a new trustee. I was a board director a few months before I took on the consultancy work, and you want to be helpful. And when you've got that expertise and that knowledge, you want to show them that you've got that, and so that you can be helpful because you're new and you want to make your mark. And I think sometimes it's coming from a good place, and it might not even be that they need reassurance. They just want to show how they can help you, and then you suddenly realize, oh, actually, no, I'm not supposed to be operational. I'm actually here just to make sure that they're getting on with things as per the strategy and the direction that we agreed the organisation would go on to,
Yeah.
rather than get into the finer detail.
And I think there's always the benefit of an offline conversation as well. So if you've got a trustee who seems to have a real interest in retail or knowledge in retail, say, look, do you want to come in and have a chat and we can talk about what's going on? And I can really explain everything to you in detail. And then there may be some stuff that trustee knows that you kind of really want to go, oh, but tell us more about that. But it means that you can hopefully reassure them, build a relationship, get an ally on board, but also work out, are there some real gems that I can use this trustee for as well? So it's it's a beneficial
Yeah.
thing, I think.
Absolutely. So moving then from governance to EDI, why is it that EDI particularly important in charity retail compared to other parts of the charity?
As I said before, our shops are out there in communities. So whatever your communities look like, they will be going in the shop. So you're going to come across really diverse communities. I think, though, when it particularly comes to our volunteer base, we are our most diverse in our retail volunteers. And whether that's ethnic diversity, particularly neurodiversity, mental health, and things like that, are really, really present. And I think it's a really important part of what we do is that we support people. I'm going to give a little example. So we have a volunteer in our Wall's End shop, and he is autistic. And when he first came, he had ear defenders on, and all he wanted to do was be in the cupboard where we store all of the CDs and DVDs and sort them. That's all he wanted to do. And the manager there worked with him and has really kind of helped him build his confidence and things, and then said, "Why don't you go on the till?" And he is now, they have a little kind of visitor book. He gets more comments than anybody else in that visitor book because he is just so chatty, and he can't praise the management team there enough in terms of what they've done to support him. That is so it's such an important part of what we do in charity retail that people just don't even see, I think, a lot of the time. We have very young people, so we have volunteers as young as 14. I dread to think how old our oldest volunteer is, but I think we do in retail have some that are 80 plus. Um, we have, like I say, all different neurodiversities, we have different ethnicities, different physical disabilities, mental health issues. We need to be able to work with, recognize, and support people. And celebrate them as well. As I say, more than the people that use our actual hospice services and work in the hospice, that is our most diverse. And what I want to be able to do is to then start feeding some of that through into our services and our wider staff group, because we want and need more of that. It brings such richness and interest and benefit to us. So we need to kind of use that almost as a pipeline to getting people through into the rest of the charity.
Absolutely. And we always say on this podcast that charity shops are such a pillar of our communities. And on the same note, hospices are such a pillar of the communities that you're in. And yeah, to have that representation on the high street is so important. Charity retailers aren't, we always say they're not just a shop managers, but we all are very integral parts of the community because we serve so much more than just the till.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, they know, especially some of ours have been there forever, and they know exactly what's going on. They know the regulars. It was lovely when going back to COVID, and we opened, I think it was 5 of our shops. And I thought, right, I'm going to go out and visit each of the shops. And I took my daughter, who'd been locked up in the house for 3 months at that point, took her out with me, and we went round all of the shops on the day that they opened. And what was lovely was hearing customers coming in going, "Oh, Sheila, we've missed you. It's so lovely to be back." And for the customers to be greeted by name as well. And that was me really going, this is more than a shop.
Yeah.
This is actually, we've got customers who are in there every single day. But this is part of their support network and part of their social life and things like that. And that's just so important. I think.
Yeah. I love that word you used, richness. I think that's a lovely positive description of what it could be when you have diversity.
Mhm.
So how can retail environments then become more inclusive for staff, volunteers and customers without being performative? How can we do that with authenticity?
Um, I'll start with customers actually, and I think there's something about us really understanding what our values are as an organisation and making sure that people know that when they're in our shops, they are in a safe place. It's really important that in our shops, we recognise that we will have the whole world coming through in terms of diversity, and that everybody needs to feel safe and needs to feel welcome in those shops. And that's a core part actually of any shop. You kind of go, why would you not
Yeah,
make
yeah.
people feel welcome? So we have to think about what we do, what we say, how we present our imagery in the shops. All of that is really, really important. We have had issues where customers have been in shops and it's mainly been about race, but have said things, and our staff first priority is the staff have to keep themselves safe. But actually, if they can then support the individual who is on the receiving end of that, they will do that. And we've unfortunately had a few instances where we've ended up having to take people through into the back of the shop to keep them safe, make sure they're okay, and things like that. So that is really important. From a staff and volunteer perspective, I do think this comes very much from the top in the messaging that we give about who is welcome and what we will tolerate and what we won't tolerate. So recently we sent out something on the back of a lot of the marches over the summer. We sent out a letter to all staff to say, and volunteers actually, to say that we understand that we've got a really diverse group of staff and volunteers, and that we will have every opinion under the sun. And I am not here to tell people what to think, but we also have values and behaviours, and we expect them to be what is on show all of the time. So if you have a view that is contrary to our values and behaviours, then it doesn't get expressed in a work environment. And I felt that was probably the best way of putting it. I can't, like I say, I can't force people to think the same way as me. Unfortunately, there would be a much better place for it. But no, I can't force people, and I'm not going to turn around, because people have their own reasons for thinking whatever they think and believe. But what I will not have is people treating people disrespectfully or making them feel like they don't belong, or even worse, shouldn't exist. So I think that has to come from the top in saying, this is just not something we tolerate.
And what role do you think CEOs and boards have in embedding EDI into their strategy and their values, instead of just policy, and get them to lead by example? And because, I can understand it, charities are scared because they run the risk of losing donors or customers or cash supporters or ambassadors if you do publicly celebrate things. What advice would you give to leaders to be brave about taking that on?
There's probably a couple of things. There's something about just doing the right thing. And if you have, I'm going to come back to values again. If you have personal values that are in accordance with your organisational values, then it should feel like it's the right thing. Believe me, I would go much further than the organisation does if it was up to me. But the other thing, and it's been quite interesting, that yes, we have had people who have objected. We've had people that have objected to us using the term diversity and inclusion. But actually, it's we don't want to water it down and pretend. But what we have had is feedback from people who are in those groups, who have then said, thank you, I feel seen, I feel recognised, it's been really helpful. And far more of them than we have the odd individual who says, well, I'm not giving you my regular donation anymore. Mm. And we don't want to lose donations, but it's that there are far more people out there who will support us because of what we've done than those who will be against us. And some of it, I'll go back to neurodiversity. We've just won an award on neurodiversity, which is fantastic. But people will object to us being outspoken on neurodiversity, and you kind of go, really? Is that where we've got to? But we know we have a lot of our staff and volunteers and service users, and particularly customers, who are neurodiverse. So why would we not go out of our way to make things comfortable for them and accommodating for them? And we will gain far more as a result. So there is something about being brave. We did have a little thing, and I think it probably came from me, because it sounds like something I say, about sometimes you just got to put your big girl pants on. And I think it's that. Sometimes you just have to go, is this in accordance with who we are as an organisation, our values? Yeah. well, then I'll put my big girl pants on, and if somebody wants to complain, I'll deal with that.
I love that. And yeah, it feels like it's so obvious to follow your values, your personal values, and the values of the organisation in a world that is so like politicised and so noisy at the moment. There's no wonder that some organisations are too nervous to put their big girl pants on and be brave. But we are a sector which has to push for as much hope and love as we can, because that is regardless, or if we're a charity that's a hospice charity or any other charity, we're all trying to fight for a better world for all of us. So I love that. From the perspective of someone in Gen Z and the younger generation, we're so aware now of how politicized everything is. Money is so political. Where we spend our money is so political. That's why I love to go to charity shops, and that's part of the reason that's become such a big trend for my generation, to shop sustainably and to shop where you know your money's going to do something, and to have that and be proud of that and put that as like a focus as part of your strategy completely appeals to myself and so many others around me. So yeah, from a youth perspective, having that at the forefront of your strategy, I think, is way more appealing.
I think people fear that it's going to have this huge backlash, and most of the time it doesn't. And even if it does, it dies out. It goes, it's that it'll pass. It's fine. Just ride it out. Stick to your values. Have a good rationale. Call people in when they question. That's the other thing. When we have had people, we haven't gone, oh, you're a nasty racist or whatever. We've gone, let's have a talk about it.
Yeah.
Let us explain to you why we're doing this. And if you still disagree, then fine, you disagree. But at least we've been able to be nice about it and talk about it.
Yeah, respond with curiosity, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why do you feel
That's it.
that way?
We did have a comment, though. We sent a survey out and we put demographic questions on for the first time. And we got one response back saying, I hope St. Oswald's Hospice hasn't gone woke. If it has, I shall be reconsidering my... And my response that didn't go to the individual was, oh, we haven't gone woke. We always were woke.
That's amazing.
Yes, love that.
Absolutely amazing.
And I think hospices, they really do have a part to play with EDI, because if there is one thing in life that is guaranteed to happen and will make us all equals, is that ultimately at some point your time will end. So hospices have a real role to make sure that whoever you are, whatever you believe in, that they've got somewhere safe and compassionate to go and have their last moments with their families. So I think sometimes hospices will go under that umbrella of, we'll just care for everyone, but it's not as simple as that. We need to make sure that we are creating change. That means they aren't scared to go in to a hospice because they're not sure if they're going to be treated well because of their sexual preference or gender or colour. And they need to be able to see that beforehand, that they're going to be welcomed.
Yeah. And that we'll meet their needs as well. It's we're not a one size fits all. And actually, if you don't want something, we're not going to make you do it. It's one of the things I love about hospice care is that it is so person driven. It's very much about, what do you want, and let's make that happen. And that's what I think all healthcare should be. And unfortunately it isn't, but hospice care really does try to meet that individual's needs and wants, and therefore EDI should be what we do. And that's how I describe it to the staff. I say, I know some people think it's a dirty word, but it's about saying what's important to you, and because it's important to you, it's important to us.
Right, so back to kind of charity retail then. Looking ahead to the future, things are really uncertain. It is an incredibly tough time for charity retailers. What do you think charity retail needs most from CEOs and boards over the next 5 to 10 years?
Focus and vision, I think. We cannot allow ourselves to become complacent. So even if you are in the fortunate position where your retail is doing really well, you can't just sit there and go, oh, well, it's fine, because the whole market is changing. I was talking to a group in a charity that I chair, and there's this thing of, actually, we need reasons to go out of our houses post-COVID. So we've become a people who need a reason to leave. And that is affecting the way that we shop and the way that we socialise and all that type of thing. So really making sure that we're adapting what we do for that. So e-commerce is a big part of what we have to do, and making that easier and better. I want to be able to go on a St. Oswald site and go red top size 10, because I'd like to lose some weight. And it'll come up with all of the red tops that we've got, and I can just order online. That's a dream. And I'm sure we'll get there, but that's where we need to be, I think, in the same way that I can do it with other online retailers. But also when it comes to our physical shops, we need to make them places that people want to go into. I think there's a lot about really thinking about where people are shopping. So we've been very high street oriented, and I love that. And actually, if I think about the high streets that we're on, we are very much a hub of that high street. So where that's working, we need to keep doing it, but think about where else people are shopping. So we have, 2 years ago, we opened our first, which I would call an out of town. It's actually just got a farm foods and a B&M, so it's not a massive one, but we're slap bang in the middle of that. And that's worked really well for us. It's a bigger store in Blythe. And it's set out very differently, and it's doing really well. And so really looking at how we can adapt more to these places where we know people go, where we know there's a Aldi or a Lidl or whatever, and they're going to be there. And actually, if we can be right next door, they're going to pop in as well. So I think really think about what the market looks like. So that's the vision part of it. But as I say, not taking your eye off the ball, not kind of sitting and going, oh, everything's okay. And then all of a sudden it won't be, because it's not all of a sudden. There's a gradual decline in that. And I think being ready to listen to new ideas and new innovation, even if you don't get it. So this is when there is a generational thing. Most boards are 50 plus. A lot of boards are 60 plus. You just might not get it.
Yeah.
But you need to believe it when a 25-year-old says, this is what's happening. This is how I and my friends shop. So we need to just have that open mind to really be receptive to some of this, instead of going, well, that's stupid and you shouldn't do it. I don't care whether you think it's stupid. That's what people are doing. And as you say, we're all going to die. The 60-year-olds aren't going to be around forever. We need to make sure that we're getting those young customers in their teens, when they've got no money and they see charity shops as a good way to get a cheap outfit, and that we keep them throughout their entire life, because they move from that to being, actually, this is a really good environmental thing to do, to being, actually, this is good for the charity that I'm supporting in our local community, and that we follow them through that whole pathway. So in the same way that fundraising is looking at stewardship, we really need to be focusing on retail stewardship of our customers.
Yeah. And I think we could do actually another podcast episode about how do we attract younger people to apply for board positions, and are we doing the right things to do that? Like, I saw one only last night about advertising for a trustee, but the two requirements were you had to either have been a CEO or you had to have really deep experience in education. And I was like, you are cancelling out so many really talented people who've got really interesting perspectives by having those two criteria. And then I've also seen things like you have to have a degree or a master's or a PhD. And actually organisations that have, a specific trustee or non-exec director role for a youth engagement position probably have a much better view of what's going on in the world, because they've got that position and they've got a perspective of someone like Mimi, who represents, the younger generation who's going to be inevitably the older generation, and there's longevity in that. So a whole nother podcast episode.
And I mean, one of the things that we have done is we've introduced associate trustees. Now, part of that is so that we can get extra expertise without needing to expand our trustees, because we've got quite a few already. But also the next step of that is for people who probably aren't quite ready for a trustee position yet, but have a lot of skills and a lot of experience to offer. And that's exactly one of those is about how do we get younger people in, maybe as an associate trustee. They may never want to become a trustee, but we're getting the benefit of them, and they're getting something that they can put on their CV, and they're getting some experience and things. So
yeah.
And just to add to that, I think it's great to have CV, and it's great to have experience and meet new people, but giving responsibility to younger people is so important. And having, for me, as a young person, I've learned so much more in the world of retail in these past 6 weeks or so that we've been recording this podcast than I did on my 3-year degree. It was in theatre, so kind of explains. But I have both of these experiences, and I know where I've felt more responsibility, understanding, excitement about what's to come. So yeah, definitely give young people a chance to have more responsibility and see how much they fly, because yeah, we are definitely the next generation of change makers.
And just tying that in with EDI and because it is in the book as well, it's really important though that when we're bringing people in to these roles, whether that's somebody who's young or somebody who comes from a different ethnicity or sexual orientation or gender or whatever, that we as a board are ready for that and have done some work ahead of that. Because the last thing that you want is for somebody like you to come into that as a young person and for everybody to treat you like they're their granddaughter and be really patronising to you, because actually then that gives you a bad experience and you will leave and you will badmouth our charity.
That's a good point.
So actually, as a board, if you're wanting to diversify, and you're right, there's a whole other podcast, but you have to sit and go, okay, so we're getting these people that are coming in and they are different. So how do we make sure that we recognise what comes with that difference and welcome that and make them comfortable and that they have everything that they need, rather than saying, well, you've come into our world and we're just going to carry on as if you're not at all different and have no different perspectives, because that's not the point.
Yeah, they've just ticked a box, haven't they? So if there's one thing to take away from today, it's that charity retail thrives when it's treated as a strategic function, backed by visible leadership, strong but balanced governance and inclusive values. And when CEOs and boards get this right, then those retail teams are empowered to deliver sustainable income, community impact and long-term growth.
And that's exactly where the Charity Retail Consultancy can support charities, helping CEOs, trustees and retail leaders strengthen strategy, governance and leadership development.
And then there's our bespoke EDI training, providing the back to basics intros to what it is, what role it plays in the third sector, as well as deep diving into key topics like unconscious bias, power and privilege, microaggressions, and practicing active allyship. It's definitely one of my favourite workshops to deliver online, but especially in person, because it takes a subject that some people can be really uncomfortable talking about, and it brings that into the open and creates really meaningful conversations and, more importantly, action as well. So drop us a line if there is something your charity could benefit from. And as I always like to say, EDI is good for business and EDI is everyone's business.
And Steph, just before we finish, we have one last question for you. We like to ask every guest that we have on the podcast if you would like to give a charity shop shout out. So the part of the reason that we do this podcast is to celebrate the unsung heroes and the people who are doing momentous work and don't get talked about enough within charity retail. So do you have a shop, a person that you'd like to shout out?
I was going to say, this is a bit like saying, which is your favourite child?
Yeah, it's Sophie's
so
choice.
I'm not going to do that, because I get asked all the time, do you have a favourite shop? And I don't. But what I would like to really recognise is we have a lot of shops that are being really innovative and really creative, and we have specialist shops and they are absolutely brilliant. And then we have the shops that just do charity retail really well, and they're delivering what their communities need in a way that they need it. And we need all of that. And I just think our retail team are amazing.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Steph, for joining us. It's been a really insightful conversation. So to all our listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode, please follow the podcast, leave us a review and share it with someone involved in charity leadership or retail.
You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn at the Charity Retail Consultancy, and also give Steph a follow. Would you like to tell people the many ways in which we can find you?
So it's normally some version of Steph Edusei. So I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, and on LinkedIn is Steph Edusei.
Fabulous. So that is all from us today. But as always, charity shops are full of stories, people and potential that deserve to be taken seriously. And we love sharing those voices with you. So until the next episode, bye.
Bye.